All right, all right. Hello, everyone. We are back again with another discussion about generative AI. I think it's our favorite topic. We get a lot of interest, and that's why we're keep bringing great experts in the field of generative AI from different industries, different background. So I'm actually on holidays in Europe. As you can see, my background is not my normal studio, and I look a little bit different. So bear with me this time. Hope to catch up with you in 2 weeks when I'm back in Sydney. Next week, I'll be in Taiwan for the Computex Summit. If anybody is around, would love to catch up. So let me know if any of you are going to go to Computex. There are going to be a lot of interesting announcements there, but this is a different conversation. We're not going to talk about chipsets today, or maybe we do, but let's see. All right. Let me know where you're tuning in. As always, we love to see our viewers where they are coming from, and maybe even telling us a little bit about their relationship with generative AI. If they are using anything interesting or any project on the horizon, definitely share it with us. So here we go. From Stockholm. Nice. So I was actually in Sweden literally last week. Gothenburg was a nice place. I was there for a couple of days, but not Stockholm. Hopefully next time. All right, let's see, who do we got here? Sri Lanka, from Switzerland. Awesome. Powell from Poland. So 2 weeks ago, before Sweden, I was in Gdansk in Poland. So here we go. We are seeing all the audience from interesting places, and it's literally the most diverse audience from California and from Austin, Dubai. I'm going to have a very interesting C-level um, conversations in Dubai. It will be a workshop about generative AI. I'm not going to talk more about that, but would love to catch up with you if you are around. And the Berlin, Italy, I would love to go through it all, and I will try to add them to the feed as much as possible. So today the conversation is very straightforward. We would like to know why AI projects get stuck in experimentation and how we can get out of it. Um, we have an expert, somebody who has a very deep understanding and background in product, especially in AI products. And we would love to have this chat to hear more about the ways that they are helping their clients and seeing what others are doing in the world of AI, or specifically generative AI. So here we have Grant Spradlin, is the VP of product at Composable Prompts, software platform for building AI applications and services using LLM-powered tasks. He is a seasoned executive and dynamic leader with a passion for disruptive technology, having expertise in IT architecture, application integration, and content services. Grant has spent 20 years helping organizations create enterprise solutions that aligned strategy, architecture, assets with business goals. Thanks for joining us today, Grant.
Thanks, Steve. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really excited.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to just jump right into the first question without any fluff. All right. I know that Composable Prompts recently did an industry survey with senior tech professionals and experts. asking about their current and future LLM initiatives. We all want to hear what was the result and how did it go.
Yeah, I'd love to tell you about some of the research that we just did with our partner SensusWide, who surveyed over 500 senior tech professionals at US-based companies with over 1,000 employees. The survey mainly asked about the challenges that IT professionals are experiencing when it comes to deploying LLM projects into production, what use cases and business units where they want to deploy or augment their processes with LLMs, and the benefits and value that they expect to get from fine-tune LLMs. And as a part of our analysis, we assessed how prepared respondents are to adopt LLMs based on how often they plan to initiate LLM projects and how many models they plan to run. So that segmented the respondents into three groups: those who are very prepared, somewhat prepared, and unprepared. And the interesting thing that we found was that only 30% of respondents are very prepared to take on LLM projects. So what we did is we asked, how frequently do they plan to initiate LLM projects for enterprise solutions over the next 2 years? So even though we found that 30% of the respondents are unprepared, 70% said that they plan to initiate LLM projects, 2 or more times per year. Almost 40%, 37% said that they plan to initiate LLM projects more than 4 times a year. And when we asked about the number of models, 94% said that they expect to run 2 or more models. And more than half, 54% of respondents said that they expect to run 6 or more models. And on top of that, the majority, 67% of respondents, anticipate having more than one inference provider. So this clearly represents a lot of demand for leveraging LLMs. And while only 30% are very prepared to do it, LLMs are coming to the enterprise and they're coming fast. So, Steve, do you have any insights about what's happening in the LLM space that you'd like to share?
Sorry, I just got cut off for a second. Working from working and connecting from a hotel is not always very reliable. So hopefully everything went smoothly. That I was not connected for a second. Yeah. So as I think as you mentioned, I missed a little bit of it, but I think it sounds like it's very interesting topic, and I don't know if you shared about that the research part and the outcomes of the research that Composable Prompts did recently.
Yeah, so I just mentioned, sorry that I lost you there for a second, but I just mentioned about the number of projects that that teams plan to initiate, and the fact that it involves more multiple inference providers, many models in multiple LLM projects per year. So a lot of demand for integrating LLMs in the enterprise.
That's great. I mean, that sounds like a great data to start the conversations. Like before jumping into the actual main topic, like can you share more about the numbers and the information you have about the LLM projects?
Yeah. So, well, maybe so I know that I missed you there, Steve, for a second, but I shared a little bit about the numbers behind the LLM projects.
Okay.
I think what's what we can move to next is about the 30% who are very prepared, right? Compared to the 70% that are unprepared or somewhat prepared, and the challenges that all of them face, regardless of what level of preparation they have, right? There's a lot of challenges out there facing facing teams. And it really boils down to I think market challenges, challenges that just are out there because of what's going on in the LLM market, and then how that impacts organizations and their adoption of LLMs. So last year, right at the end of December 2023, Intel reported that only 10% of organizations launched generative AI solutions into production. In the latest research, in the last few months, puts that up around like maybe 15. I've seen some reports of maybe even up to 20% adoption. But given the business interests and benefits and demands, it's clear that some things are still holding back enterprise adoption, right? And the bottom line is that the LLM market is a challenging one. There's been an explosion of models with different capabilities, different performance, different costs, right? There's a vast domain of knowledge, right? A vast domain of use cases that vary by industry and company size. And there's also a vast domain of development tools and frameworks for doing LLM projects. On top of that, there's a race among the AI providers, right, to eat up that market share. And that's created a very complex vendor ecosystem with different prompt formats, different APIs, and different security practices. So the LLM market is still extremely early, and innovation is driving rapid change. And the combination of that innovation and rapid change is leaving organizations exposed. So for organizations to start from scratch with their LLM projects, it's resource intensive, including people and time and money to get to the point of showing value. And it's inefficient for enterprise teams, right? Product owners, prompt engineers, traditional developers, when they're working in silos with different tools. And the deployment is extremely hazardous because organizations risk total vendor lock-in or model lock. And they lack the enterprise-grade tools to be flexible and to operate these LLM projects. And that's one of the reasons why, or the number of reasons why, companies are stuck in experimentation with no clear path to production or how to get the results that they want. I don't know, Steve, if you've heard about any organizational challenges or market challenges in particular from some of the folks that work.
Yeah, that you actually made great points. I mean, kind of sum it up, but that's right. I mean, major ones that I'm hearing about is first of all, we have, as you mentioned, many LLMs coming from different directions.
I think we might be losing Steve again. I don't know if he's freezing for folks in the chat. Well, I think we might have lost Steve to his hotel connection for the moment. So I'll go ahead and start and jump into some of the top reasons that are preventing AI projects from going from experiment to production. So according to the research that we did with Censuswide, 90% of the senior tech professionals believe that fine-tuned LLMs will bring value to their organization, right? So the outlook is very good. But just remember, only 30% are very prepared to run those LLM projects. And we know that only somewhere between 10 and 20% have actually deployed Gen AI solutions into production. So there's still a huge gap between the enterprise demand and reality. So, what are the reasons holding these teams back? We asked that as a part of our research in the survey, and we asked the senior tech professionals to select up to 3 reasons that prevented their AI projects from going forward into production. So maybe before I reveal what the top, hey, welcome back, Steve. Maybe before I reveal the top the top reasons holding back LLM projects from going to production. I'm interested if anyone wants to leave any comments in the chat about any of their own, experiences, either directly or indirectly, about the challenges or the obstacles that they've run into.
Yeah, I think we would love to hear from our audience. As you can see, this is really live event, really live event. You can probably notice from from the complexities of the some of the challenges we got. But yeah, while you're writing it down in the comments, I would like to mention some of the things that I'm seeing quickly from the model's perspective. Like decision making is very difficult. Locking in with a vendor is also one of the problems. A lot of companies don't know when and how to decide that special transition to working with specific models. I think the interoperability between these models is going to help a lot. Um, Also, the experimentation sort of phase and lots of unknowns around that area is another complexity that a lot of CFOs are kind of looking at it. It's just like it's just more complex for them in terms of understanding exactly what are the boundaries and how to manage that. They're kind of comparing it with pharmaceutical industries where they run multiple experiments and then a couple of positive results will be able to run the company for a long time. And also data is always the one of the biggest topics, from the infrastructure perspective to the data um, policies and privacy, integrity, and everything else in between. Let me see some of the comments here we got. Grant, do you have access to the comments, or
Yeah.
do
I can see the comments coming in, and it definitely resonates with the answers that we got from folks in the research. So thanks for those who were brave enough to chime in and add a note. But some of the top things that I see in the chat: cost, most definitely. The cost, or in other words, resource limitations, was one of the top reasons. 28% of respondents cited the resource limitations as the top issue. I see security and compliance a number of times. Security concern comes in at number one spot, with 41% of respondents saying that security concerns are the top reason holding their projects back. And then, without kind of parsing through the rest here, because I think those are the two that stand out to me as kind of the most common from the chat here. Those are the top two: security concerns and resource limitations. The other ones that are really close runners up. All of these are 26, 27% answers from respondents. So difficult to prove the ROI. That factors into the cost, right? Having a poor test scope, having a lack of sufficient tooling, and it's too complex to manage multiple AI providers. So, what I'd like to do is I'd like to look at each one in more detail, but do that in the context of initiating an LLM project, right? So we just kind of read them down from top to bottom. Top concern to the next concerns, right? Again, security, resource limitations, difficult to prove ROI, poor test scope, lack of sufficient tooling, and too complex to manage multiple AI providers. But when we look at, initiating an LLM project, the first one that you encounter is, proving the ROI as one of the top reasons. And of course, because, that's an initial obstacle to innovation. You need to build a business case to prove whatever ROI may be realized through the efficiency gain, the performance improvement, the cost reduction, or the risks mitigated by implementing the LLM, solution into your software. So one of the current challenges is that this is still novel for most organizations because they haven't done it before, right? So, LLMs are new to most organizations, and we're at a very early stages of enterprise LLM adoption. So the outcomes that are promised haven't been proven in most organizations. And there's skepticism about, the potential or the results that they're going to get. And like we called out, many of the costs are variable too, especially if it's your organization's first LLM project, or you don't have the resources that you already need, established. So that kind of brings us right into that number two reason, which is the resource limitations, right? Again, it's a top organizational challenge that I called out a little bit earlier, because to start from scratch, it's resource intensive. That includes people, time, and money. Organizations need to spend the time and money investing in their, either investing in their existing staff to train and learn about the LLMs, how to use them, how to integrate them, or they need to hire more skilled and knowledgeable resources from what I would say is an already pretty limited pool, of subject matter experts. So, organizations also need people, time, and money to build the infrastructure, right? Because, without the infrastructure, you lack the sufficient tooling, which is, the next challenge, right? 26% of tech professionals are saying that they lack the sufficient tooling. Like many things in IT, it comes down to like the typical build versus buy decision. However, most of the tools are fragmented and they're only frameworks, right? So a lot of the early adopters have spent significant time trying to invent the LM project wheel. But the further and the deeper you get, the more problems you have to solve, deepening the investment and slowing down the progress, right? And that's why you hear about these projects that, they went way over the cost or they went way over the timeline. And that's because they haven't, learned all these things yet, and they don't have the tools to do it quickly in a repeatable way. So, I'm gonna give an example of just some of the features that when we asked the very prepared, those who are very prepared to run LLM projects, what were the most important features that they were looking for? So all of the features that I'm about to rattle off, 80% or more of the very prepared respondents cited these features as important to their LLM project, right? And I'll try to give like a logical flow to this. So first, you need to design your prompts. So you need, a lot of times you'll look for a tool or something like that to do your prompt design. Well, now you design some prompts, and the more prompts you have, the more you want to reuse them or, establish a library of prompts, right? Because this is your business logic here, right? You don't put this, this is not stuff that you want to put into code, right? We don't put, business rules into code. We don't, put the workflow into code, right? We have tools to do this stuff. And so, you might have, so now you have your prompts, you've designed them, they're in your library, and you got to test them, right? You got to test them against one LLM. You got to test them against another LLM. And each time that you want to do that testing, there's a new barrier to just get to that point where you can even test it and run it. Because without testing and running it, you're never going to validate your LLM output, right? So you need a way to validate the output of the LLM. And as you get that LLM output, right, you're going to refine things. You're going to refine your prompts in your tests. And that leads to needing things like versioning and approvals, right? Okay, so now we have our basic prompts. We can test them. So, but what about our business data, right? How do we incorporate our business data? So then, organizations are looking at RAG or retrieval automated generation, right? And how to bring their business content into the prompts that they're writing to get more specific, business specific results. Okay, so now we incorporate our business data and we're using a foundation model. Now we need to fine tune the model. So we need tools to fine tune the models too. All right, so finally we have our prompts. We have, we have our data pipeline for RAG. We've fine tuned our models. We're going into production, and guess what? Now you got to monitor the whole thing, right? You need monitoring, you need analytics, and then on top of it, right, that thing that was called out by many people in the chat, you need security, right? So these are all things that LLM projects need in the enterprise to be successful. But a lot of times they come at it in piecemeal, right? And they start with the one thing that leads to the next thing. And this is just an example of all of the pieces that need to come together to have an effective use of LLMs in the enterprise. So just imagine building all of that if you're not a top tier tech company, right? IT organizations are missing the enterprise tools for managing LLM projects and LLM operations. So another example of this brings me to the next reason holding back AI projects, right? There's a lot behind the tooling there, so I wanted to dive into that one a bit. But another reason, which is also related to the tooling, is that 26% said that it's too complex to manage multiple AI providers, right? And as we learned from the market research, 67% said that they anticipate having more than one inference provider, right? So, well, how hard can that really be, right? It's just you hook into a couple APIs, right? Instead of one API, now you have two APIs. Well, no, wrong. Let's say you want to look at like some of the major inference providers out there: OpenAI, AWS Bedrock, Google Vertex, Microsoft Azure, right? First of all of them have different APIs. And then let's say we want to go with something like Google Vertex or AWS Bedrock. Well, each model has its own input and output format. And so as teams start to connect these APIs and experiment with LLMs, what they find, what happens is they end up establishing point-to-point integrations that create tight coupling between their software and the AI providers, right? And this is exactly the recipe for AI vendor lock-in, right? So be very careful about choosing your AI provider because everything's moving so fast, right? And that's why you need tools to help abstract that. So to avoid getting stuck, organizations need the flexibility to change and leverage multiple inference providers. And because without that, you're not going to be able to drive innovation as new LLMs become available, right? Just look at like the past 6 months, how many LLMs have come out and how many new versions of LLMs have come out, right? And how many projects got deployed in that time frame. So you need to be, you need tools if you want to remain agile when it comes to working with LLMs. The next reason holding back projects was a poor test scope. 27% said that they had a poor test scope, preventing the projects from moving forward. And I believe that's kind of like a meta issue. It really boils down to a few underlying issues, which goes back to, I think, poor tooling, and as people called out in the chat, data and access to data. So in terms of the tooling, we already know that 26%, right, pretty much the same segment, right, reported insufficient tooling. So tooling to test the prompts, evaluate different models, safely incorporate business content, fine-tune the models, and verify the results, right? And this is all from an LLM, right? LLMs are by design non-deterministic, right? You're gonna get variable responses. So I think a lot of teams are getting hung up on the tooling when it comes to testing the integration with their LLMs, and then when it comes to the data and the access, as they say, garbage in, garbage out. You need real business data to test and get the best results from the business tasks that you give to your LLMs. You also need historic data to fine-tune them. So I'm sure many here have heard about organizations that have tried, to integrate with LLMs, but they get mediocre results. And we also hear about things like LLM hallucinations, right? The reason why LLMs, quote unquote, hallucinate is because they're not given the right data in context, right? You need to give very specific data in context to get a very specific business result. Okay. So the reality is that most organizations haven't successfully brought their private business data together with LLMs. And on top of that, you hear like the horror stories in the media about when companies, have employees who send confidential information to ChatGPT, right? And that brings me to the last reason, which is security. So 41% of the respondents cited security concerns as the top reason why AI projects aren't going into production. And security is a broad topic. There's a lot that's bundled in there. First, you need to keep access to your LLM environments safe, right? You can't have LLM access openly exposed in your application, right? You look what enterprises have been doing for years, for decades, is you need services, right? A services layer to define and enforce who can call what LLM task, right? And by doing that, you also dramatically reduce the attack surface on LLMs from things like bots, and other threats, right? So that's just the tip of the iceberg, right? Then you have like the standard, what you like, regardless of what it is, right? What the solution is when it comes to security, of course, you need encryption, right? Everything needs to be encrypted, and encrypted in transit, encrypted at rest, right? You need fine-grained access control over the users in the application services, especially when it comes to your private business content interacting with users in LLMs. So businesses need services to control what content is exposed to what users or processes. And then of course, like, everything needs to be traceable and auditable, right? Who ran what prompts against which LLMs and when? What business content did they have access to? What was the final prompt that got rendered? What was the result of the LLM, right? You need to be able to look back at all of this data, and to be able to, one, cover your tracks, right? The old CYA, but also mitigate risks, but also you can use this data to improve, right? To learn and make your tasks even better. So Steve, I don't know if you're hearing anything else out there, any top issues, but I don't
Yeah,
know
I
if there
mean,
come to mind for you that like are near and dear.
these are great points. I mean, you kind of sum it up very well. It was one of the most comprehensive ones that I've heard recently. It is very deep, and as you said, I can just I guess reiterate on some of the most important ones that I'm hearing a lot, specifically the security and the hallucinations, are the ones that are pretty much on the I guess as the main conversations around the table when the C levels are talking about trusting these LLMs to either make it a customer facing app, or even sometimes even using internally. They are always afraid of like who is going to be accountable for the issues that might arise, and lots of unknowns, as you mentioned, the traceability, the governance. These are very important parts of an enterprise ecosystem where um, the decision makers wants to stay still in the loop. They want to make sure that they have the upper hand, and they are the final decision maker until we get, I guess, more of the agents replacing the decision making process at some points, or maybe we would always want to be in the loop in the decision making process. But yeah, would love to hear more about like the operational challenges, because as you mentioned, like these are great projects, but a lot of these companies that are looking at it, the enterprises that are looking at it, would love to put it in production
Right.
and take it to the next level. So what are the operational challenges that you see in the enterprise teams, leveraging AI LLM projects?
Yeah. When it comes to the production operations, right, you need to be ready to hit the ground running. So as we just discussed, right, you need to have security covered, right? It includes encryption, authentication, fine-grained security control over services and data. And if you want to stay in production, right, it's best to ensure that you have a nice audit trail of all the activity. And then, but the thing is like LLM projects aren't one and done, right? With the rate of the models coming out, right? LLM projects evolve. So you need to be agile. You need to be, you want to be agile if you want to move with any speed. So you need tools to collaborate across teams and roles, to refine, test, and redeploy, your services that are interacting with LLMs. And then with things changing in production, you need governance over deployments, the tasks that are running, and those ongoing changes. And to get the best results from LLMs, as I like alluded to earlier, you need to use and reuse the results. You need orchestration and data. You need orchestration to bring data in memory when it's needed in your prompts or in your services. You need to be able to handle scenarios when LLMs are slower to respond. That happens sometimes, right? You need to be able to handle failures. There was something in the media not too long ago with like an OpenAI service outage. So it's like a lot of the same things that just enterprises have to think about in general with putting any software into production. And these are just some of the things that we're doing at Composable Prompts to enable LLM adoption for those that are at earlier stages of just getting their LLM projects into production.
Do you have any more information about the adoption path down the track?
Yeah. So for those who have been there, done that, and are further along the path, right? We had some findings in the research. 86% of the very prepared respondents, right, reported that virtualized LLMs, right, LLMs that have a load balancing, failover, and multi-head execution as a very important feature. So, it's not as, I think, well known as just the foundational models, but virtualized LLMs with load balancing or failover can distribute tasks across multiple models. So that can eliminate any one model as a single point of failure. You can use it to do things like A/B tests or run multivariate tests against multiple LLMs with multi-head execution, right? This is when basically you send a task to multiple models in parallel. And you do that as an approach to assess and select the best result. So for example, you send a prompt to multiple models and then have another model evaluate the responses, stack rank them and select the best response from all the models. You can use it to evaluate and gradually roll out new models. So if you want to have a main model as a reference and then execute another model for evaluation. And if you want to compare answers over time across models, right? How are these two models performing against each other? And then you can even fine tune lower cost models based on the results of the better performing models. So for example, you take the results of the better performing model and you use that to create fine tuning for the lower cost models, to give the answers that you want. So these are exactly the features that we have in Composable Prompt Studio to help organizations at later stages of their LLM adoption. And for those further down the LLM adoption path, we also have the monitoring and the analytics that I talked about, right? Those highly desired features from enterprise tech professionals. because that's how you're going to monitor the model performance. You're going to understand what the speed is, what the quality is, what the costs are, and fine tuning based on the data from previous runs. So, once you, run the results against one model, as long as you're storing those results, right, you can use those results that are high quality to fine tune the LLM, right, and make sure that it's giving the responses that you want. You can even take that a step further into automated self-tuning and improvement.
These are great points. I mean, lots of great features that help enterprises to actually understand more about their projects, and you know, um, they want to be in the driving seat, and that these are the right tools for, I guess, the IT leaders to understand more. But at the same time, we have this problem of innovations going so fast, and we have a lot of different things coming out of everywhere. I was talking to a CTO who wanted to do some experiments, and he's like, I'm sure before I get the project signed and start the MVP and finish it, my project going to be irrelevant.
Yes.
So that's one of the complexities. So how can the IT leaders advance LLM adoption, at the same time keep up with the innovation rate and the speed of innovation rate, as it's crazy?
Yeah. That's a really great question. I think the simple answer is that IT leaders need to address the top reasons that we talked about head on, right? Those are just the realities of the market and the organizational challenges. So in order to do that, they need tools and they need infrastructure to do it, right? So with the right tools and infrastructure in place, right, you can rapidly create, test, and deploy LLM powered services, right? It can be as simple as connecting an LLM environment to get access to the latest models, and with the ability to switch models, right, without having to build something new to a new inference provider, right? Tool to design and reuse the prompts, right? When you do that, you want it to be in a generic format because you want to run it against any model, right? You want to avoid the syntax and the language that's specific to any one model, right? So that becomes more stuff that like you need in your tools and in your infrastructure, right? You need a way to very quickly define what the task is that the LLM is going to perform, right? And ultimately, even if you have those tools, do all those things, you still need the infrastructure to test and deploy it, right? So as long as you have the tools in the infrastructure to rapidly create those tasks and deploy them, then it can become as easy as, using a consolidated API. So instead of using the API from every different provider and learning every different model and what's expected of it, right? You can avoid steep and endless learning curves associated with learning all of that, right? Because I think the thing is that developers want to use traditional tools for development, right? Which are APIs, right? So whether it's like a REST API or an SDK or a command line interface, right? You want to be able to abstract that complexity through the enterprise tool, right? And what you definitely want to do is you want to avoid hard coding the prompts and LLMs in your code, because that's the recipe for vendor lock-in. And with the right tools, you can easily elevate LLM experimentation to production grade LLM operations by, like I said, monitoring the runs and the performance, auditing the LLM inputs and outputs, managing the versioning and the publishing. And you need to be able to like improve and fine tune at every level, the prompt, the tasks, and the LLMs, right? Those are all different areas where there's opportunity to improve the result that you're getting back from the LLMs. It's not just about the model itself, right? And if this all sounds kind of daunting for an organization to build, yeah, it should, right? How many organizations out there built their own ERP or their own CRM from frameworks? There are some, but most don't, right? Most look for the enterprise tools, right, to bring them the features and the capabilities that they need to manage the dynamic changes of business and IT environments, right? So LLMs are such a game changer that you really do need enterprise software to maximize the value of this technology, right? We created Composable Prompt Studio as a SaaS solution to address the challenges that we discussed today, with the goal to accelerate LLM adoption and realize the value that LLMs bring. So, I know we're getting close to our time here. If anyone is interested to learn more, you can visit our website, composableprompts.com, and reach us through the website.
Yeah,
Steve,
that's great. I
it's
mean, I want to just say that like this was an awesome conversation, as you mentioned. Like we are on the dot for the this live session, and I would like to thank everyone and thank you, Grant, for joining us.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure to be here, share the results and insights into what's holding LM projects back, and what teams need to be, what they need to be successful. I hope it's been insightful for folks.
Loved it. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for
All right.
joining us.
Thank you.